Remember when $100 actually felt like $100? You could go to the grocery store, fill your cart, grab some gas, and still have money left. Now, you walk into a supermarket with $100 and somehow walk out with 2 bags of groceries and a receipt that looks like a phone number. Rent is expensive, cars are expensive, insurance is expensive, eating out is expensive, even your morning coffee somehow feels like a financial decision. So what happened? Did companies suddenly decide to make everything ridiculously expensive? Did the government cause it? Was it COVID? Or is something much bigger happening underneath the surface? Today, we're breaking down why everything became so expensive and why prices haven't simply gone back down. Here's the first thing you need to understand. When people say inflation is going up, they often mean prices are rising. But there's an important difference between prices increasing and inflation slowing down. And this difference explains why you might hear that inflation is improving, while your grocery bill still feels painful. Let's go back to where this story really begins. In 2020, something happened that the modern economy wasn't prepared for. The world essentially hit the brakes. Businesses closed, factories slowed down, people stopped traveling, restaurants shut down, supply chains were disrupted. And suddenly, the global economy was trying to operate under completely abnormal conditions. At the same time, governments around the world introduced massive support programs to help households and businesses survive the economic shock. People still needed food, they still needed housing, they still needed essential products. But the system producing and delivering those products had been severely disrupted. Think about it like this. Imagine a restaurant suddenly has 100 customers, but only enough food for 50 people. What happens? The food becomes more valuable. Prices can rise. That's basically what happened across parts of the global economy. Demand recovered faster than supply in many areas, and that imbalance pushed prices higher. Here's where things get interesting. You might think, why would a problem at a factory in another country affect the price of something I buy in America? Because the modern economy is incredibly interconnected. A single product can involve raw materials from one country, manufacturing somewhere else, shipping across an ocean, and final assembly somewhere completely different. Now imagine ports are backed up. Factories can't get enough components. Shipping becomes more expensive. Delivery takes longer. Suddenly, the cost of producing and transporting products increases, and eventually, those higher costs can make their way to you. That's why inflation isn't always about someone simply deciding, let's charge more. Sometimes, the entire cost of producing something has changed. But there was another side to the story. After the initial shock, consumers started spending again. People wanted cars, homes, electronics, furniture, travel, restaurants, and all the things they had postponed buying. The problem? The supply side couldn't always keep up. Imagine there are 10 cars available, but suddenly 50 people want them. What happens? Prices have a reason to rise. This is basic supply and demand. And when similar imbalances happen across thousands of products and services, you don't get one expensive product. You get broad inflation. That's when people start feeling, why is literally everything getting more expensive? This is probably the most confusing part. You hear inflation is falling, so you expect prices to fall too. But that's not necessarily what happens. Imagine a product costs $10, then its price rises to $12. That's a 20% increase. Later, inflation slows dramatically, but that doesn't automatically mean the product goes from $12 back to $10. It might simply stay around $12, while prices rise more slowly from there. That's called disinflation. The rate at which prices are increasing is slowing, but the price level itself remains higher. And that's why people can hear, inflation is improving, while looking at their grocery receipt thinking, then why am I still paying this much? because slowing inflation doesn't erase previous price increases.
And then there's housing. For many Americans, housing is one of the biggest expenses they face. But housing costs aren't determined by inflation alone. You also have limited housing supply, construction costs, land prices, mortgage rates, local regulations, and demand. When borrowing costs change, the housing market can change too. And even if the price of a house doesn't move dramatically, your monthly payment can still become much more expensive when mortgage rates rise. That's why someone buying the same priced house at a different interest rate can face a completely different financial situation. Now we get to the part that really hurts. Your salary may have increased, but if your expenses increased faster, you can still feel poorer. Imagine your income rises from $60,000 to $65,000. Sounds great, but if your rent, groceries, insurance, transportation, and healthcare costs rise significantly at the same time, your lifestyle might barely improve. This is why people don't experience inflation through an economic report. They experience it through their monthly budget, the grocery receipt, the rent payment, the insurance bill, the restaurant check, the gas station. That's where inflation becomes real. So, will everything become cheap again? Probably not simply because inflation slows. Some prices can fall. Others can stabilize. Some can continue rising. The economy is constantly changing. But the bigger lesson is this. You shouldn't build your financial life assuming prices will stay the same forever, because they won't. And that's why understanding inflation matters. Not because you need to become an economist, but because your money, your savings, your salary, and your investments all exist inside this system. So, why did everything suddenly become so expensive? It wasn't one single villain. It was a combination of supply chain disruptions, changes in demand, labor and production costs, housing pressures, energy prices, monetary and fiscal conditions, and other economic shocks. And the biggest misconception is thinking that once inflation slows, prices automatically go back to where they were. They don't have to. The economy doesn't have a reset button. So the next time you look at a $100 grocery bill and think, how did it get this expensive? Remember, you're not just paying for today's prices. You're also living with the price increases of yesterday. And that's the part of inflation most people never understand. Subscribe for more simple explanations of money, inflation, banking, debt, and the American economy.